You never forget the sound of your own heartbeat when you're wondering if it's about to be your last. My name is Malcolm, and I am a construction engineer trying to raise a family and make ends meet. That job involved a lot of traveling. One of such trips I will never forget quickly. The rain had been falling for hours, heavy, punishing. Street lights smeared into long streaks through the windshield, and every wiper swipe felt slower than the last. I was tired, too tired, but I kept telling myself, just another 20 minutes, and I'd be back at the motel. Then, headlights. The truck was in the wrong lane. No time to think. Just a flash of chrome, the scream of tires, and a sound so loud it felt like the world split in two. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't feel my legs. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the weight of a thought I couldn't push away. I might not make it through this. They tell you that in moments like this, you'll think of your loved ones. I did. I thought of her, Shayla, the woman who'd promised to stand by me no matter what. At 11:58 p.m., the paramedics pulled me from the wreck. At 12:06 a.m., I was in the back of an ambulance staring at the ceiling lights sliding past. I kept whispering her name, expecting she'd be there when I woke up. I didn't know then that the person I was calling for had already made a choice, one that would hurt more than any broken bone I carried that night. This is about what comes after, about what you do when the person you trust most leaves you at your weakest. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you this now, it's because sometimes you have to understand the wound before you can understand the scar. I remember the first time I saw Shayla like it was yesterday. It was September 2011, weeks after Hurricane Isaac had left our streets soaked and our spirits battered. Baton Rouge had been spared the worst of it, but the community still came together to help our neighbors in New Orleans. I was volunteering at a relief drive, loading crates of bottled water into the back of a rusted pickup, when I noticed her across the parking lot. She had on jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and a smile that could make you forget the sky was still gray. That smile caught me first, but it was the way she carried herself, like she knew exactly where she was going and how she was going to get there, that kept my eyes on her. Her name was Shayla Harris, 35 now, but back then she was 21 days from turning 22, full of ambition and energy. A high school guidance counselor, she said, helping kids see possibilities in themselves they couldn't yet see. That sounded a lot like what I believed in, too. I was a 39-year-old mechanical engineer at the time, working steady hours, nothing flashy. I'd grown up in New Orleans, scraped my way through college, and built a life where loyalty was my currency. I didn't have much else to offer in the way of glamour, but I had honesty, work ethic, and a belief that if you loved someone, you stood by them, no matter how long it took to build the dream. That first conversation was easy, like we'd already known each other in another life. We talked about rebuilding homes, about how our people always seem to find joy even in rubble. She laughed at something I said, even though it wasn't that funny. Later, she'd tell me she laughed because she liked the way I looked at her, like she was the only person in the room. That's how it started. A relief drive, a half-hour conversation, and a sense that maybe, just maybe, the storm had brought me something worth keeping. In the years that followed, we built our relationship the way you build a house, one careful decision at a time. We talked about owning property, about starting a business together, about creating something that could outlive us both. We took weekend trips to small towns, scouting neighborhoods we thought might be ours someday. But even in those early days, there were hairline cracks in the foundation. I just didn't want to see them. She'd make little comments about how slow my career was moving, about how we should be living bigger. At first, I brushed it off as playful ambition. She wanted more for us. Wasn't that a good thing? Looking back, I realized those moments were the red flags. Her smile could soften them. Her touch could erase them, but they were still there. And when you're in love, you don't call them red flags. You call them roses, and you hold them close. The truth is, love makes you a willing accomplice to your own blindness. You want the story to be perfect so badly that you stop asking yourself if you're reading it right. On that fateful day of the accident, it was raining heavily. It was the kind of rain that makes the sky feel heavy, like the clouds were pressing down on the world. September 17th, 2021, Biloxi, Mississippi. I'd been on the road since before sunrise, driving back from a client meeting, just trying to make it home in time for the weekend. The highway shimmered under the slick of water, headlights and taillights smearing into ribbons of red and white. I remember gripping the wheel tighter than usual, my wipers slapping a frantic rhythm, and telling myself, just 30 more miles. Then it happened. A semi-truck in the next lane swerved without warning. In that split second, the world snapped into chaos. Tires screamed, my truck lurched sideways, and metal twisted against metal with a sound that cut straight through my bones. I saw shards of glass scatter through the air, glittering like ice under the streetlights. The seatbelt dug into my chest, the taste of copper and salt filled my mouth, and the world spun until it all went black. When I woke, it wasn't a silence. It was to the steady beep of a heart monitor, the sting of 4 needles in my arms, and the ache that told me I was alive but broken. My right leg was in traction. My ribs felt like they'd been set on fire, and every breath carried the weight of something deep inside, torn or bleeding. They told me I had multiple fractures, internal injuries, and that recovery wouldn't just be a matter of days. It would be months. I tried to piece together how I'd gotten there, but my mind was foggy, like it had been wrapped in wet wool. Shayla came that first night. Her smile was soft, but didn't quite reach her eyes. She kissed my forehead, told me to rest, and sat in the chair beside me with her phone in her hand more than her eyes on me. I told myself it was just stress, that maybe the sight of me wired up to machines was more than she could take. But something about her felt far away. Even when I spoke, I had to wait for her attention to drift back from whatever was glowing on that screen. The second night, she stayed for less than half an hour. The third night, she didn't come at all. I asked the nurses if maybe I'd missed her while I was sleeping, but they just shook their heads. I kept telling myself she was busy, maybe working late, maybe dealing with something at home. I gave her the benefit of the doubt because that's what love does. It makes excuses for absences. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice started whispering a truth I wasn't ready to face. And I wish I could tell you I ignored it because I was strong. The truth is, I ignored it because I was scared. I thought she was busy until I learned she'd moved on to something else entirely. I remember the exact moment the nurse's words landed, like a dull hammer in my chest. She said it casually, almost in passing, while adjusting my four. No one's called to check on you in over a week. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks between them, trying to process what that meant. A week, 7 days of pain, blood tests, and morphine dreams, and not a single call from the woman who promised to stand beside me in sickness and in health. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she was just coping in her own way. But the quiet was heavy, and it pressed on my ribs harder than the fractures. That night, I called her, straight to voicemail. I called again, and again. Each time, her recorded voice greeted me, cheerful, warm, painfully familiar, followed by the cold beep that meant I was talking to empty air. I sent texts. No reply. I checked our messages. Our last exchange was 3 days before the accident, a silly argument about groceries. My hand trembled holding the phone. I didn't know if it was from the pain or from the truth forming in my gut. On the third day of silence, I made the mistake of opening social media. I wish I could unsee it. There she was, Shayla, in a silver dress, champagne in hand, standing on a rooftop in Houston under strings of golden lights. Her smile wide, her head tilted against a man's shoulder. Another photo, same night, dancing, hair thrown back, the city skyline glowing behind her. And me? I was lying in a hospital bed with tubes in my veins and stitches in my skin, scrolling through proof that life had gone on without me. I called her friends. The ones we'd spent summers with, the ones who'd toasted at our wedding. Suddenly, no one had answers. Some let the phone ring out. Others kept the conversation short, nervous laughter in their voices. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about her being too busy or needing space. This was about something else entirely. Something bigger. That's when I realized I wasn't just recovering from an accident. I was recovering from being erased. When my cousin's text came through, I almost didn't open it. My hand hovered over the screen, my thumb trembling just enough to betray me. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. It demands satisfaction, even when you know the answer might break something inside you. The picture loaded slowly, like the universe wanted me to feel every second of the blow. And there she was, Shayla, her smile bright and wide, leaning into a man whose arm draped around her like he'd earned it. I didn't know his name yet, but the way he looked into the camera told me everything about his confidence, about how certain he was that what he was holding now was his to keep. My cousin's follow-up text was short. Houston, last night. Thought you should see. A second later, another message. That's Dorian King. I didn't need the Google search to confirm who he was. Flashy suits, loud cars, a real estate portfolio he boasted about on Instagram, like a trophy case. And women, plenty of them. The kind of man who doesn't just cross lines. He paints over them to make them disappear. What cut the deepest wasn't that she was with him, but when she'd gotten there. Just days after my accident, she'd moved into his world like mine had never existed. I didn't rage. I didn't throw my phone or shout into the hospital walls. That's the thing people don't understand about betrayal. It doesn't always ignite. Sometimes it freezes you, locks you into a silence where every thought is sharper than any scream could be. I studied that photo. Her body language, his hand placement, her choice of dress, the shade of lipstick she only wore when she wanted to feel untouchable. It was a language I'd learned over years of loving her, and now I was decoding it in reverse. The nurses came in and out, adjusting IVs and checking vitals, but I barely noticed. My mind had already shifted into something colder. This wasn't about love anymore. This wasn't about heartbreak. This was a game of patterns, and Shayla had plenty of them. I began cataloging what she values, what she fears, what she hides in plain sight. Every detail became a data point. She thought I was gone. She thought she'd traded the weight of my recovery for the shine of his attention. But I was still here, watching, waiting, building a map in my head with only one destination. If she thought my accident had taken me out of the game, she'd soon wish it had. After 4 months of being here, I didn't tell the doctors how much strength had already come back to my legs. Every time they left the room, I'd push harder, lifting, standing, holding myself just a second longer than the last. They thought I was following their schedule. I was building my own. This wasn't about recovery for health's sake anymore. This was about being ready. Ready to move without warning. Ready to strike without hesitation. I called Ty after months of silence. He didn't ask why. It's the kind of friendship built in backrooms and whispered deals, where favors are remembered and questions are optional. Ty had always been good at seeing the cracks in a man's life, and he knew exactly how to widen them until the whole thing fell apart. I told him I needed everything on Dorian King: money, habits, people who'd call him at 3 a.m, the kind of skeletons that didn't just rattle, they screamed. He came back with a map of their lives. Bank statements with sudden spikes in spending, photos of Shayla draped over him at rooftop bars, receipts for trips that lined up too neatly with my hospital stays. I studied them the way a hunter studies tracks in the dirt. I wasn't rushing this. Revenge has a shelf life, but when you keep it sealed in the dark, it only gets sharper. The shell company was easy. Biloxi's full of paper fronts, fishing outfits that never see water, construction firms that never touch a hammer. I dressed mine up as a land development deal, something Dorian wouldn't resist. Ty would feed him whispers, show him proof of quick returns. Dorian thought he was stepping into a gold mine. He was stepping into a sinkhole. The beauty of it was in the distance. No confrontations, no raised voices, just his own greed pulling him into the pit I was digging. He'd never see my hands on the strings, but I would feel every tug. And when the ground gave way beneath him, I'd be standing close enough to watch him drop. I stood in that Galveston ballroom like I belonged there. Black slacks, pressed shirt, the kind of bland uniform no one notices. My name tag read Logistics, and that was all anyone needed to know. The air smelled faintly of ocean salt and overpoured champagne, but then I caught it. Her perfume. That same warm, floral scent that once lingered on my pillow for days. It hit me harder than I expected, almost knocking the breath out of me. She was only 20 feet away, laughing, leaning into him. Dorian's hand rested on the small of her back like he owned her, like he'd earned her. I tightened my grip on the clipboard and reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about strategy. The retreat was a perfect stage. Candlelit dinner tables, a jazz trio playing slow in the corner, waiters weaving through with trays of seared scallops. I'd chosen this venue because it screamed exclusivity without crossing into suspicion. Ty had handled the rest. The fake land development plans, the glossy brochures with fabricated blueprints, the bank statements that looked so convincing even a seasoned investor would salivate. The key was urgency. Pages stamped with confidential in bold red. Fine print warning that the opportunity would close in 10 days. 10 days for them to dream of millions they'd never see. I watched Shayla flip through the documents like a child with a new toy, her eyes catching on numbers that meant nothing but still looked like gold. Dorian kept nodding, pretending to understand the development jargon I'd deliberately padded with nonsense. They leaned in close over the table, their heads touching, whispering as if they were the only two people in the room. What they didn't know was that every piece of paper in front of them was bait. Bait I'd soaked in their own greed until it reeked enough to draw them in. From my corner, I studied them like a biologist watching rats find the cheese in a maze. No hesitation, no suspicion, just hunger. Hunger for more money, more status, more of the life they thought they'd stolen from me. I wondered if either of them remembered the man they'd left bleeding out on the cold floor years ago, or if I'd already been reduced to a ghost in their memory. They signed the preliminary interest forms that night, hands quick, pen scratching as if the ink might run dry. I didn't have to push. I didn't have to sweeten the deal. They walked right into my net without ever looking down. And as I walked past their table to collect the papers, I made sure to glance at Shayla, just long enough for her to feel that strange flicker of recognition without being able to place me. They took the bait so easily. I almost felt insulted. I could almost taste the irony when the wire transfer cleared. $250,000. Money they thought was planting seeds for a brighter future was now buried deep in soil they'd never find. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, layers of ownership so tangled even the IRS would get dizzy chasing them. I didn't just take their money. I took the certainty they had in themselves. And I made sure they kept believing in the dream. Every few days I sent Shayla and Dorian glossy progress reports. Gleaming steel beams rising into the sky, lavish marble floors glistening under staged lighting, and smiling workers in hard hats. None of it belonged to me, but in their minds, I was building an empire on their behalf. The truth was, I was building my own fortress, brick by brick, deed by deed, with their money as the mortar. Shayla had always prided herself on appearances, on being the woman who had it together. But now, cracks were forming in her perfect facade. I heard from mutual acquaintances, people she thought weren't watching, that she'd started pawning jewelry, selling designer bags, even letting go of her precious BMW. Dorian pretended not to notice, or maybe he noticed and didn't care. Maybe he thought the storm would pass, that the investment would pay off and their lifestyle would snap back into place. But I knew better. I was the storm, and storms don't pass until they've taken what they came for. Every picture I sent, every update I crafted, every phone call where I spoke with the confidence of a man who owned the world, it was another twist of the screw. I wanted her to feel the walls closing in, but not too quickly. There's no satisfaction in a quick kill. This was about erosion, watching her life wash away one tide at a time. And the best part? She thanked me for it. She told me she appreciated my dedication, that I was a blessing in their corner. The woman who once looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't enough now trusted me with everything she had left. And I'll admit, there were nights I'd sit back, whiskey in hand, replaying her voice in my head, not the confident tone she used when she left me, but the brittle one she had now. The one that cracked ever so slightly at the edges. The one that told me she was afraid but didn't know why. The woman who left me for more was now losing everything for less. And as I watched her slide toward the bottom, I asked myself, would watching them lose it all be enough for you? Or would you want to be there to watch the moment they realize who pulled the trigger? I could feel it happening without lifting a finger, like watching a glass crack from the inside. Dorian's empire, if you could even call it that, was crumbling faster than he could spin his lies. Every venture he touched turned to dust. Investors wanted their money back. Creditors stopped asking politely and started showing up with legal papers. His swagger, that chest-puffed, I own the room kind of confidence was gone. You could see in the way he walked, shoulders tighter, eyes darting like he was expecting someone to tap him on the shoulder with bad news. Shayla, she was slipping too. The same woman who used to spend hours on the phone, laughing with friends about brunch reservations and vacations, now sat alone in cafes, staring into her coffee like it might tell her what to do next. Her so-called friends had moved on, and in the circle she used to reign over, her name was no longer followed by envy. It was followed by a smirk. She had become the subject of whispered conversations, the kind people lower their voice for, not out of respect, but because the scandal is too good to say aloud. And that's when I planted the seed. One small, carefully worded message sent from an untraceable account to Dorian. Funny how Shayla's name came up in those old debt records. Maybe you should look into that. That was it. No accusations. No details. Just enough to get under his skin. And it did. I didn't need proof for him to believe it. All I needed was his ego. He started looking at her differently. Like every word out of her mouth came with an agenda. She saw it, too. Started asking him where he was going, who he was talking to, why he was locking his phone. The cracks were spreading. I didn't have to break them. I didn't have to shout their sins from rooftops or pull some grand, cinematic stunt. All I had to do was wait. Let suspicion and pride do the work. It's funny. People think revenge is about the moment you strike. But sometimes it's about knowing when not to. I remember the smell of that place before I even stepped through the door. Burnt espresso, cheap vanilla syrup, and the faint scent of bleach that clung to the floor. It was the kind of cafe people walked into when they were killing time, not when they wanted good coffee. I've been sitting in my truck for 15 minutes watching her through the fog glass, watching her move between tables with the kind of forced politeness that dies the moment a customer looks away. Shayla had always been quick with her words, sharp when she wanted to be, sweet when she needed to be. But now there was a drag to her step, a tired bend to her shoulders. I could have watched her a little longer, let the tension build in me until it was unbearable. But some moments you don't plan. You just decide. And I decided I was going in. The bell over the door gave me away, but she didn't notice me at first. She was wiping down a counter, hair tied back, uniform too big for her frame, the shine gone from her. I walked to the register, slow, steady. That's when she turned, and the world around us shrank to the width of the counter. Her eyes locked on mine, and I saw it. The split-second flicker of recognition, the involuntary tightening of her jaw, the pulse at her neck kicking into overdrive. She tried to mask it, but fear is a language you can't unlearn once you've heard it. She was fluent. "Can I help you?" Her voice was steady enough to fool the untrained ear, but I wasn't here for illusions. I didn't answer right away. I just watched her, letting the seconds stretch until they hurt. I saw her fingers twitch against the cup in her hand, felt the air between us turn heavier, thicker. Finally, I leaned forward, elbows on the counter, and gave her a smile that wasn't meant to comfort. "You should have stayed until the end," I said quietly. "Now, the end will stay with you. I live better now. The bills get paid without me holding my breath. My fridge stays full, the lights stay on, and I don't have to check the price tag before buying something I want. People look at me and see a man who made it through the storm, who rebuilt himself from nothing. They don't see the ledger I keep in my head, the one where every wrong done to me is written in permanent ink. They don't see that every choice I've made since that night has been shaped by one truth. I was never going to be the man people could walk over again. Some mornings I wake up before the sun and just sit in the quiet. That's when I feel it the most, the weight of what I did, but not in the way you think. It's not guilt. It's clarity. There's no regret, no second guessing. Just an understanding that my life split into two parts the moment everything fell apart, and I chose which version of me survived. I went back to the accident site last week. The grass has grown over the skid marks, the guardrail's been replaced, and the smell of burnt rubber and metal is long gone. People drive past without knowing what happened there, without realizing that a man's life ended on that stretch of road. Not in the physical sense, but in every other way that matters. That place should have been my grave. Instead, it became the point where I stopped being the victim. Sometimes I think about how easy it would have been to let life take me where it wanted, to let Shayla's betrayal define me as just another man who got played. But I didn't. I chose my own ending, even if it meant becoming someone I never thought I'd be. People love to talk about forgiveness, about letting go to find peace. But peace doesn't always come from letting go. Sometimes it comes from taking back what was taken from you, piece by piece, until you can look in the mirror and know you're standing on your own terms again. And if you're listening to this, wondering if I'd do it again, the answer is yes. Every time, without hesitation.